Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the testimony. It's nice to have a couple of Arizonans here, and Dr. Pine and Bruce. It's good to see you, and we've talked on a number of occasions, and I appreciate the testimony from those who know so much on this. I appreciate work of Chief Tidwell. I think it's important to acknowledge some of the positive developments that we've seen recently related to forest management. Last month, I think all of us were encouraged to learn that Phase 1 forefry, the record of decision was signed. That will allow, as Chief talked about, large-scale management rather than just a couple of thousand acres here or there. The paltry 3,000 plus acres that has so far been treated is emblematic of the pace that we have, that it's simply too slow. So we've got to do it on a much larger scale. Chief, you've noted, 58 million acres at high or very high risk, and we've got to move on a larger scale. So we all recognize achieving reduction in hazardous fuels is critical, and we've got to find a way to solve this fire borrowing issue. I like some of the proposals that have been put forward. Myself, Senator McCain, Senator Barrasso, and others have put forward some as well. By way of disrupting these activities, we in terms of suppression, we're putting the hazardous fuels reduction on hold. We're also putting communities and firefighters at risk, as we know all too well in Arizona. And as Bruce talked about today, we're also increasingly creating challenges for maintaining a healthy watershed and for what that does to drinking water supplies. For all these reasons, I'm obviously supportive of efforts to resolve the fire borrowing issue by allowing a limited adjustment to statutory budget caps under specific circumstances or scenarios. For example, when the Forest Service and DOI exceed anticipatable, or those that we can forecast, wildfire suppression costs, there is no doubt that wildfires are disastrous. They have a tremendous impact on communities that derive their livelihood from the national forests, on water quality, and on wildlife. But we cannot let the disastrous nature of wildfire make us lose sight of many of the costs of fighting fires, and that we can anticipate them. Let me be clear about that. Many of the costs of both preventing and as well as fighting fires can be anticipated, like municipal fire departments that budget for expected personnel and incident response costs. I believe that we can do much the same here. I would agree that on the significance of the problems that wildfires present, but where there is some disagreement is dealing with these so-called anticipatable costs. I would support efforts that recognize that in some years there will be large fires that drive the wildfire suppression costs well above those that were anticipated. In those years, if the agencies have been appropriated 100% of the anticipated costs, I think that limited budget cap adjustments to allow the agencies to fight fire without borrowing from other sources would make sense. But again, if they've been fully budgeted for what is easily anticipated as a realistic cost of suppression, then that would apply. Frankly, I would like to see sufficient funds on the front end. I think we all would like to see that to be put into suppression activities as well. Sound budgeting requires dealing with both preventable symptoms as well as resulting disasters. What I disagree with is the notion that we should simply move 30% of those anticipated costs off budget because it's convenient or because it creates additional flexibility for increased spending under the statutory budget caps, paying for one disaster while furthering our current fiscal disaster doesn't make sense. And we need to be realistic here about what we can do. We need to deal with the House as well and be realistic about what we can budget for and what we can't. There is a solution to be found on the issue. I believe that it involves flexibility, but only after 100% of those anticipatable suppression costs have been expended. Let's not confuse disasters with unanticipated costs. We need to plan for what is likely to occur, to take steps necessary to prevent those disasters from occurring, and then use flexibility in those rare years where we go over those costs. I hope that my colleagues in the administration will come together and find a solution, a long-term solution on this issue. I didn't want to use all my time speaking here, but I believe I have, so thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, Senator